If I'm reborn, give me power.
Royal physician Han Seol-ah had spent most of her life learning how to prevent death, yet when her own execution came, there was nothing she could do to stop it. At 28 years old, Seol-ah was one of the youngest physicians ever permitted to serve inside the royal palace. She had earned her position through years of study and an unusual ability to recognize illnesses others overlooked. She understood herbs, poisons, wounds and fevers, but more importantly, she understood people. That was why she knew the charges against her made no sense. 3 days earlier, Crown Prince Yi Eun-bi had collapsed after drinking his evening medicine. Seol-ah had prepared it herself, but when traces of poison were discovered inside the bowl, suspicion immediately fell upon her. She tried to explain that the poison had not been present when the medicine left her hands, but no one wanted an explanation. Someone needed to be blamed, and a young physician without a powerful family was convenient. As Seol-ah knelt at the execution ground, rain soaked through her clothing, while officials read the charges against her. She barely listened. Her thoughts remained with Crown Prince Yi Eun-bi. She had treated him for nearly 5 years. He was impatient, stubborn, and sometimes difficult, but he had never treated her as though her lower birth made her worthless. That was why she could not understand his silence during her trial. Perhaps he truly believed she had poisoned him. When the executioner stepped forward, Seol-ah closed her eyes. She had spent years believing knowledge could protect a person, but the palace had taught her otherwise. Knowledge meant very little when powerful people had already decided what the truth should be. Her final thought was bitter. If heaven ever gave her another life, she did not want intelligence. She wanted power. The blade fell. When Seol-ah opened her eyes again, an elderly woman was pulling a blanket over her shoulders. "Princess, please eat something." Seol-ah stared at the woman, unable to understand what she was seeing. The room was tiny, rain leaked through one corner of the ceiling, and the paper covering the windows had been repaired so many times that patches covered patches. A bowl of cold porridge rested on a wooden table beside the bed. Then the woman called her princess again. Seol-ah looked down and saw 2 small hands resting in her lap. She quickly climbed from the bed and hurried toward an old bronze mirror. The face staring back at her belonged to a little girl who could not have been older than 6. "What is my name?" Seol-ah asked. The elderly maid looked concerned. "Princess Yi Eun-bi." Seol-ah became completely still. She knew that name. Princess Yi Eun-bi was the youngest daughter of King Yi-sung, born to a concubine who died shortly after childbirth. After her mother's death, Eun-bi had been moved to an isolated residence near the northern wall of the palace and was rarely mentioned again. There were no great stories about her life and no songs written in her honor. History remembered her with a single sentence. Princess Yi Eun-bi died from winter fever at 9 years old. Seol-ah stared at her 6-year-old reflection. Heaven had given her exactly what she asked for. She had been reborn with royal blood, but somehow she had become the one princess nobody remembered. Worse, she had only 3 years left to live. Over the following days, Seol-ah quietly observed her surroundings and quickly understood why the original Eun-bi had disappeared so easily from history. The servants assigned to her residence stole from her. Rice meant for the princess was replaced with cheaper grain, firewood disappeared before reaching her chambers, and medicine sent during cold weather was sometimes sold outside the palace. No one feared punishment because no one important ever visited Princess Eun-bi. Even the king had not seen his daughter in nearly 2 years. At first, Seol-ah was furious. Then she stopped thinking like an offended princess and began thinking like the physician she had once been. Healthy children did not repeatedly suffer unexplained stomach pains. A 6-year-old should not remain weak despite eating every day, and the faint dark lines beneath Eun-bi's fingernails were not caused by simple malnutrition. Someone had been giving the child small amounts of poison. Princess Eun-bi had never died from winter fever. Someone had murdered her slowly enough that nobody bothered to notice. From that moment, Seol-ah stopped wondering why she had returned to the past and concentrated on staying alive. She secretly discarded the tea delivered every evening, gathered safe herbs from the neglected garden, and convinced her elderly maid, court lady Bok, to prepare her meals personally. Within several weeks, Eun-bi's constant stomach pains began to disappear. Unfortunately, someone noticed. One evening, Seol-ah discovered a servant searching through her room. The woman claimed she was cleaning, but Seol-ah recognized her immediately. Her name was Yeon-ha. Years later, that same woman would become an attendant in Crown Prince Ijun's residence. More importantly, Yeon-ha had been questioned after Ijun was poisoned in Seol-ah's first life. The connection was impossible to ignore. Whatever conspiracy eventually framed Seol-ah had begun many years earlier, and somehow the forgotten Princess Eun-bi was connected to it. Seol-ah needed someone powerful enough to investigate, but the king barely remembered she existed. That left only one possibility: Crown Prince Ijun. In Seol-ah's previous life, Ijun had been 23 years old when she was executed. Now he was only 11. Her opportunity to approach him came during a spring ceremony when all the royal children were ordered to honor their ancestors. It was also the first time Seol-ah saw King Yi-sung. Her new father walked past without recognizing her. Only after an attendant whispered into his ear did the king stop and turn around. He stared at the little girl standing among his children until recognition finally appeared in his eyes. "Eun-bi," Seol-ah bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." The king looked at her for a few uncomfortable seconds before continuing toward the ceremony. A voice suddenly came from beside her. "Why are you crying?" Seol-ah quickly wiped her cheek and turned. 11-year-old Crown Prince Ijun was standing there. Seeing him as a child was unsettling. The man Seol-ah remembered had been tall, sharp-tongued, and intimidating. This Ijun was clearly trying to look equally intimidating, but his ceremonial hat was slightly too large for his head. "I'm not crying," she said. Ijun frowned. "There's water on your face. It might be rain." He looked toward the perfectly clear sky. Seol-ah sighed. "I don't like you." Ijun looked offended. "Everyone likes me. That probably explains why you're so unpleasant." For several seconds, he simply stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, Ijun laughed. It was the first time Seol-ah had ever heard the crown prince laugh so freely. After the ceremony, he found her again. Then he found her the following day, and within a week, he had discovered the neglected northern residence where his little sister lived. He arrived carrying sweets and left furious. "Why is it so cold in here?" Seol-ah continued reading. "Because firewood is expensive. You're a princess." Apparently nobody told the firewood. Ijun stared at her before noticing the thin bedding, damaged windows, and watery porridge beside her. The following morning, carts filled with rice, firewood, new bedding, and clothing arrived at Eun-bi's residence. 6 servants from the crown prince's household came with them. Seol-ah watched everything being unloaded and remembered something about Ijun she had almost forgotten. He had always been stubborn. Apparently, he had been born that way. Their relationship grew naturally after that. Ijun visited whenever his lessons ended early, while Seol-ah helped with his headaches by adjusting the herbs in his tea. He brought her books, although he became increasingly suspicious when his 6-year-old sister read them faster than he did. One afternoon, he finally asked, "Why are you so strange?" Seol-ah looked up from a medical text. "I was born this way." "You read medical books. I like the pictures." "There are no pictures." Seol-ah quietly closed the book. Ijun narrowed his eyes but did not question her further. For the first time since returning to the past, Seol-ah began enjoying her second life, and that frightened her because she already knew what happened to people she cared about inside this palace. So she continued investigating. Eventually, she discovered that Yeonhwa had been receiving money from Chief State Counselor Jo Gyum, one of the kingdom's most powerful officials. Seol-ah remembered him immediately. Jo Gyum had overseen the investigation into Crown Prince Ijun's poisoning in her previous life. He was also the man who had recommended Seol-ah's execution. The truth slowly began taking shape. Eun-bi's mother had not been the insignificant concubine Seol-ah once assumed. Before entering the palace, she had belonged to the Se clan, a family controlling important military forces along the northern border. After her mother's death, those connections would eventually pass through Eun-bi. The forgotten little princess was far more valuable than anyone realized. If Eun-bi died young, those military alliances could be redirected. If Crown Prince Yeon later died without an heir, Jo-gyum could support another prince whose family he controlled. The deaths were years apart because they were never supposed to appear connected. Seol-ah finally understood why she had been framed in her first life. She had simply been standing beside Yeon when the conspiracy reached its final stage. Before she could tell him what she had discovered, Yeonhwa disappeared. That evening, Yeon arrived carrying a small wooden box. "I brought something for you." Seol-ah reached toward it, but immediately noticed a faint powder along the edge. "Put it down." Yeon frowned. "What?" "Put it down, and don't touch your face." Something in her voice made him obey. Seol-ah carefully examined the box. It contained poison. There was not enough to kill Yeon immediately, but there was enough to make him dangerously ill. Then Seol-ah understood the plan. The box had entered through the Crown Prince's household, but had been delivered to Eun-bi. If Yeon became sick after visiting his forgotten sister, suspicion would fall upon Eun-bi's servants, and perhaps upon Eun-bi herself. The conspiracy was moving faster because someone knew they were losing control. Seol-ah finally told Yeon everything she could without revealing her previous life. She explained that someone had been poisoning her for years, and that she believed the same people intended to target him. Yeon listened quietly. When she finished, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Seol-ah hesitated. "I didn't know whether I could trust you." The words hurt him. She saw it immediately. Yeon stood and looked directly at her. "I would never hurt you." For a moment, Seol-ah saw the man from her first life instead of the boy standing before her. She remembered waiting for him to defend her during her trial, and dying believing he had abandoned her. Then Yeon continued, "If something happens to you, I will believe you before I believe them." Seol-ah could not answer. Long after he left, those words remained with her. That night, another memory returned. Seol-ah realized she had never actually seen Yeon during her trial. Officials had told her that the Crown Prince refused to speak for her. She had simply believed them. What if Yeon had never been given the opportunity? The following morning, Yeon secretly brought the poisoned box to King Yi-sung. For the first time, the king personally investigated what had been happening inside his own palace. Royal guards seized financial records, servants were questioned, and Yeonhwa was captured while trying to flee the capital. Her confession exposed everything. She had been ordered to slowly poison Princess Eun-bi and make her death appear to be illness. Crown Prince Yeon was meant to be weakened over the following years until Jo-gyum could remove him as well and place another royal child under his control. Jo-gyum was arrested, and the conspiracy that had followed Eun-bi and Yeon across 2 lives was finally destroyed. Several days later, Yeon came quietly to Eun-bi's residence. This time, however, he was unusually serious. He confessed that for years he had suffered from the same strange nightmare. In it, he was an adult crown prince who had been slowly poisoned. A female physician had cared for him for years, someone he trusted more deeply than almost anyone around him. Then she was accused of poisoning him. Yeon remembered desperately trying to stop her execution, but the poison had left him too weak to remain conscious. When he finally awakened, she was already dead. In the nightmare, he died that same day. He could never remember the physician's face after waking, but he remembered the grief of losing her. Then he looked at Eun-bi and quietly admitted that somehow, his little sister always reminded him of that woman. Seol-ah could not answer. For the first time, she understood that Yeon had never abandoned her. He had simply been unable to reach her in time. Tears filled her eyes, and without explaining why, Eun-bi leaned gently against her brother's shoulder. Yeon complained, as always, but he never moved away. From that day, the two became closer than ever. 3 years passed. Princess Yi Eun-bi reached her 9th birthday, the day history once claimed she would die. Instead, she woke to falling snow, court ladybok's warm smile, and Yeon arriving with far too many gifts. Behind him came King Yi-sung carrying seaweed soup with his own hands. During those 3 years, the king had begun making up for the daughter he had neglected. Members of Eun-bi's mother's Se clan had also returned to her life, and the forgotten princess was forgotten no longer. Eun-bi accepted the soup and softly called him father. History had said Princess Eun-bi died at 9. This time she lived. As the years passed, Eun-bi continued studying medicine and became respected throughout the palace for her knowledge and compassion. She remained close to Yi-jun, eventually becoming one of his most trusted confidants as he prepared to rule. Seol-ah had once believed she needed power to survive. Her second life taught her something different, only having the people she loved reach her before it was too late.